email security still today poses one of the greatest threats to businesses and individuals
Mm-hmm.
because it is, I like to use the kind of euphemism of it's the front door to an organization and to your house because anyone can send you an email. Anyone can send you an email, and the only thing that you have to do as a user at an organization or you as an individual is to open that email, think it looks legitimate, click something, and then you're in a whole world of hurt.
Welcome to Podcast Wise, Perspectives, Cybersecurity and AI. Today, we're diving into the front door of cybersecurity with a guest who has seen the industry from every possible angle, from the oily floors of an auto manufacturing plant to the high-stakes world of global field strategy. Our guest today is Seth Williams, the Global Field CTO for partners at Sublime Security. Seth is a heavy hitter in the partner ecosystem, specializing in scaling MSSPs and GSIs through technical alignment and measurable growth. But don't let the executive title fool you. Seth is a self-described technologist at heart. He started his career in the trenches, physically imaging machines and troubleshooting systems on the production line, a background that has given him a unique, no-nonsense perspective on how security actually works. In this episode, we're talking about why you need to master your ABCs before you try to be an ethical hacker, why AI is more about advanced calculus than magic, and why the humble email inbox remains the most dangerous and most abused initial access vector in 2026. And for those of you who know the intensity of a true rivalry, stay tuned to hear why Seth thinks there's nothing quite like a Saturday afternoon in Morgantown, West Virginia, and the specific tradition that makes every Mountaineer victory complete. All right, let's get started. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Hey, Seth, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Tim?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. All right, let's do an icebreaker and get into it. You frequently post on LinkedIn about a variety of cutting-edge security topics, from threat detection to AWS security. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone just starting their career in cloud or security operations today?
Yeah, so it's a super great question because I get asked a lot that in my everyday life. And my response is to learn the basics first. I know it seems intuitive to do so, but oftentimes you see folks are so enthralled with the cybersecurity landscape and the cool things that people are doing, either with penetration testing and red teaming to the ultra cool defense that one can provide to organizations for organizations. But if you skip over the necessary understanding of how computers and systems talk to one another, understanding networks, understanding how applications are built, understanding how endpoints are configured, run, and where to go to fix certain things, that foundation that makes you be an extremely effective defender or penetration tester is absent. So rather than diving straight into, ethical hacking, maybe take a course in networking. Maybe take a course in how to understand hardening of operating systems. So really build a strong foundation that you can grow from that bases you in an understanding of computers and networks without security layered on top from the start.
Okay, that's good advice. It's like basically learning your ABCs before you can learn how to read.
Exactly. Diving right into security training without that foundation can not only make the security training a little more difficult. When you move into a career in cybersecurity, that foundation will hold you through a lot of situations that you encounter.
Yeah, I can attest to that because I did the basics first, right?
Yeah.
My bachelor's is in networks and security. And prior to that, I had like some experience in break fix, computers and printers, troubleshooting Outlook, troubleshooting Word, Excel, and stuff like that. And then I went into the education part where my bachelor's was in networks and security. And then I did my master's in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
I did the layered thing. So it was much easier once I did my master's. I understood the terms and the acronyms versus like, what does this mean?
Yeah, absolutely. When you spend time traversing var log in a Unix box and you understand what you need to fix in order to make a system run as an administrator, understanding that foundation of file systems as a cybersecurity operator becomes much more easy to flow into because you essentially know where where a lot of things are. Basic blocking and tackling, I would say, and it doesn't have to supplant the cybersecurity dream, but it is certainly something that I feel personally, because just like you, I started my career as a technologist. That was my title at my first job, was a technologist. I was the fellow who would be sent out to image a new machine or pull a machine off of the production line. I worked in an auto manufacturing plant. Pull that machine off, it's not operating correctly, and then bring it back to your desk and figure out why it's not operating correctly. And that gave me an invaluable understanding of the system of an endpoint. And then you progress into server architecture, and then you progress into cloud infrastructure, and you gain a really solid understanding of what these computers and networks are actually doing, how they communicate, what ports and protocols they operate on.
Yeah.
And then it gives you just an extremely, extremely large head start on those who've just dove right into cyber.
Yeah. That's a good advantage to have. So you've highlighted the intersection of AI and machine learning with security. Where do you see the biggest potential for these technologies to reshape defensive strategies? And what is the key pitfall security teams should watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question. Artificial intelligence has changed the game, right? I was recently listening to an educational video on YouTube, and I apologize, I can't recall the individual who put it out there, but it was the understanding of how neural networks are designed and the decision-making process from one, for lack of a better term, neuron to the next layer of neuron to make a better decision, and the weights included within the vector in order to get to that decision. And understanding that is not paramount to why I wanted to I was like, well, how do these things make these decisions? So, and the reason why I asked that question, why do these things make these decisions when they make them? And it boils down to understanding what's most likely, right? What's most likely going to give the response that answers the prompt as written, or meets the objective for an agent's job, right? So understanding that it's advanced calculus in machine learning and artificial intelligence with neural networks making specific decisions in these large neural networks, understanding that that is all just a bunch of calculus and it's choosing the best right path is a way in which to really take a step back and understand that AI is not this be all end all uber intelligence that just knows the right answer all the time, which grounds me in, to answer your question, a practical application of this new technology and tool. So I talk a lot about artificial intelligence as being the right tool for a specific job. And those jobs typically are having the foundational model trained to a specific use case or a specific objective. Large language models in and of themselves trained on the internet are inherently flawed because they're trained on the internet.
Yeah.
So applying critical tasks or addressing critical tasks with agents requires one to be very specific about what that model has been trained on and what that model's objective is. So it was a bit of a rambling answer, but essentially the practical application of AI and ML should be very targeted to a specific environment, right? Yeah. I want to ask this model a question about, in my case, email security. That model should have a very good understanding of what is good and what is bad about emails.
Right.
So it seems very natural to say this, but that's not always the case. Some products, some models that exist within this technology sphere nowadays, there's foundational models answering to the best of their ability based off of a data set that is comprised of the entire internet. And as we know, as I've been telling my kids for a long time, you can't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah.
So the practical application of artificial intelligence really comes down to trusting an organization that puts out an agent or a model for reference that has been trained specifically to do a thing and do that thing quickly.
Yeah. And effectively.
Absolutely.
Now, based on your activity related to cloud SIEM, what is the single biggest challenge organizations face today when migrating their security monitoring to the cloud? And what is your top recommendation for overcoming it?
The biggest challenge, I would say, for folks is an understanding that on-prem instances, if that's the migration you're talking about, let me confirm first, like migrating from a legacy security infrastructure that we control, we rack and stack to a SaaS offering. Is that what you're asking, Tim?
Yes.
Okay. As a person who used to build and rack and stack those things with the help of some very talented people, is that you're not losing control over your data, your very highly critical system of record that is a SIEM, right? You're not losing control of that. So it's essentially a people and thought process mountain that you must climb in order to get to the first step of actually migrating. You're not losing control. The systems that you are operating on now will have likely quicker and better access to the sources that comprise the telemetry that you want to see within this critical system. And it's maintained by an organization that has done this, or hopefully an organization that has done this for hundreds, if not thousands of customers. So the resources required in order to run this system will always be there for you. And you can take advantage of that and gain efficiency by not having to manage a system that's on-prem. So this is a very practical infrastructure-based recommendation on the resistance to moving workloads to the cloud in general, is that just because you go there doesn't mean you're going to lose control. You may actually gain more visibility and efficiency once you move there.
Yeah. Because also when you're on-prem and let's say that you have a data center or something like that, sometimes you have to rely on the people at the data center to, let's say you want to you want to do a hard reset on the
Mhm.
server, right? That's additional cost, right? To
Oh,
do
yeah.
something like that. Versus on the cloud, you just go on the console and be like, okay, shut off, reboot.
Yeah. The management of systems is extremely, extremely accessible centrally,
Mhm.
although the resources are distributed geographically. So you're getting a really good deal for not only high availability but disaster recovery from either your own infrastructure or a SaaS vendor that you purchase from. There's a lot of benefit to moving to the SaaS. Now, when it comes to put the lens of cybersecurity over it, gaining access to other SaaS systems is quite easy. SaaS to SaaS communications is quite easy. I mean, that's how the world goes round nowadays, that maybe folks don't think about too much, is that the interoperability or the integrations between systems is rampant throughout your everyday life. And
Yeah.
in cybersecurity operations, it needs to be fast. Onboarding a new source because it has highly critical telemetry needs to be easy. I don't want to have to, you know, like you said, put in a ticket with this particular group so that they understand that they need to flip switches on for this syslog source at their networking device. So in the cloud and SaaS land, you can do that often very quickly.
Mhm.
So you gain a ton of efficiency, and then storage is very, very cheap too.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like expanding is much harder on-prem versus on the cloud. Because on-prem, you'll need to go, install a external hard drive or, expand your hard drive, whatever you need to do. But that's much harder to do that on-prem versus on the cloud. On the cloud, you're just like, I need a new instance, and then here you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a different image type, and I can stand up my workload here, or I can use tools like Kubernetes and create pods that auto scale and take care of the load both up and down during times of potentially seasonal traffic that increases. Like the tools and resources available to administrators of infrastructure, administrators of application, developers, and security professionals, the tools available for use within these hypervisors it far outweighs the desire to have control over a given environment. Now, that's all to say that those with requirements to keep data on-prem, right? There's nothing we can do about that. But if you have the option to host your own resources within a data center that you're coloed in, or one that you even own, or go to the cloud, I'd say probably go to the cloud simply because of the reasons we talked about.
Yeah, definitely. Now, given your interest in AWS security, what's a common misconception about the shared responsibility model that you frequently encounter, and how do you advise company to clearly define and handle their side of their responsibility?
Well, I think you've actually answered with my answer in your question. So, a common misconception is that the AWS shared responsibility model gives a lot more of an inherited control from the hypervisor. So that's said in another way. We understand that we have some responsibility to protect our environment on this cloud environment, but we think the hypervisor is going to do a lot more than what they're actually doing, right? So ensuring your S3 buckets are not open to the world is your responsibility as the user of this hypervisor of AWS, right? So common misconceptions would essentially amount to folks thinking that the hypervisor is taking care of you when they're not, because the hypervisor can't. And that's not a knock against AWS. It's not a knock against Azure GCP. People's use cases are vast and wide, and sometimes they need a thing open that may look insecure to one organization, but is actually critical to another. So for folks that are entering into this migration journey, that entering into talking about putting their critical workloads on cloud, they need to understand that the responsibility, the shared part of the responsibility that really matters about how do I protect my critical data is on you. It is your responsibility to ensure the controls are in place, that your data systems and resources are up to date, that they are inaccessible from those folks that you don't want them to be accessing them. So it is truly a shared responsibility model, especially on the cyber side, that the customer is carrying a lot of the weight there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, on LinkedIn, one of your posts covered the importance of robust threat detection. In a highly automated and tool heavy environment, what essential role does human expertise still play in uncovering sophisticated or novel?
Well, it's a great question, because in today's time, there's a lot of new tooling that exists
Uh-huh.
since the, economic advantages of AI have now shown themselves. Like, we can use AI in a pretty cheap way. There's a lot of tools out there that are not necessarily claiming that they'll replace detection engineers or replace analysts, but there's a lot of chatter out there that we can gain more efficiency through the use of artificial intelligence. And I preamble with that simply because you will never replace the human brain.
Right.
Not, at least not in my lifetime. There may be some network out there eventually in 50, 60 years that can do something that is spectacular. Not sure that I'd want to be around to see that, but the human brain is something that is absolutely magnificent in the way that we can intake information and process that information sub-second and provide a determination really without much time at all. Now, that only comes from experience from the folks who have been in the trenches.
Uh-huh.
So those folks that have done the work, that have, like we talked at the beginning, that have put in the work to understand foundational knowledges about computers, networks, systems, malware, red teaming, that have done the work and become these absolute experts in cyber, offensive and defensive. Those individuals and the way in which their brains operate and the way in which they parse data will never be replaced I don't think ever, to be quite frank. They will always influence at a minimum what that model is going to respond with in the future.
Right.
So I do believe that detection tools will continue to get better, and artificial intelligence spliced into those detection tools is already good today.
Uh-huh.
But what a lot of the public doesn't see is that in addition to the geniuses who have built these neural networks and who have established this AI world that we now live in, the data that is really isolated and used to train these models comes from very fantastic people. And the detection engineers, those folks that understand intimately technology and how to protect and exploit technology, those folks will always be paramount, and they're the ones providing the source of truth.
Yeah, I would say that having the human eye on top of the detection, like the AI detection thing, it's also a key factor in it where you want to have, you trust but verify the output, right?
Sure.
So, like, you can have false positives and stuff like that where you're like, oh, this was a malware, but really it's not.
Yeah.
Like you don't know until you actually verify what it is, and that takes the human eye to glance over it. Like It's also like when I think they call it human in the loop,
Yep. Human in
right?
the loop.
So I think having the human inside the loop where it can verify the data, the response that it gives versus just relying only and solely on the AI. I think that's why the human factor is still in there.
Absolutely. Human in the loop essentially means just that. We're just doing a little bit slower. We're training those models and those detection tools that are making those decisions on behalf of our organization or our customers. That human in the loop is a manual nudge to that model to say that no, you got this one wrong, or maybe you hallucinated a bit, or you made up some information that you thought was there that isn't. That human in the loop is that manual intervention from those experts, from
Yeah.
those folks who have put in the work and really learned and understood how these systems work together and how they can be exploited and how they can be protected.
Yeah. And that's why I like the fact that, so like I use Gemini, right? And at the bottom is always says, Gemini might be wrong,
That's right. That's
right?
right.
It
I
might be
mean,
wrong. Just make sure that you know that it might be wrong. So yeah.
it's so fascinating though, Tim. If like working, just being a family man, right? Day in, day out, chatting with my wife, chatting with my brother, my in-laws, my mom. They all kind of use AI, right? Natural language prompts to ask a question, a recipe, what's a good recommendation, this or that. And how often it is that little grayed out kind of text at the bottom of that prompt is like, hey, I'm telling you this, but this could be wrong.
Mhm.
We ignore it. Like it becomes a bit of like our brains just kind of, how they say you can see your nose at all times, but your brain ignores it. I think
Oh,
that's
I
what
didn't know that.
happened. Yeah, don't think about that. That would give you a bit of a headache if you start thinking about it. But yeah, we kind of ignore that, and I fear at this point in time in our journey with artificial intelligence, just generally outside of cyber, that we're a little too trusting, especially in the world where folks aren't as up to date on the latest and greatest technology news. Like
Right.
my mom, I love her. She was an accountant, an incredibly bright woman, but she doesn't read Cyber News Daily, right? She doesn't
Right.
read AI Digest. She
She
doesn't pay
reads
attention.
right. She reads what she reads, right? She
Exactly.
likes what she likes and whatnot. It's not in her purview to be looking at cyber news or AI news. And
Exactly.
unless it's like it's on, the big four news network and be like, hey, this is breaking news. It was
Yeah, exactly. And
an
it's
attack
usually
yeah.
yeah,
There's
it's
an
usually
attack on the
sensationalized to
yeah.
say something, like hide your kids type of stuff. But even they when they're using these tools, they're they kind of ignore that. They kind of ignore that little thing that you saw in Gemini, like AI can be wrong.
Mhm.
But
Desensitized.
yep,
Yeah,
that's
because
exactly right.
we see it so much, and then it's like no longer there at one point. Like you don't see it anymore,
Yep.
but
You
it's
don't
still
see it.
there.
It is there.
It's
It's
still
it's
there.
That's right. Absolutely right. So unless it's in your face all the time, you're probably going to tend towards trusting what response you get, which I would, you know, pivoting back to cyber and just technology in general. We as technologists need to also temper what we get in response to any query. Right. This could be during operations with a tool. This could be during our own research. This could be in a number of different use cases in our day to day lives. But I'm sure you've probably had folks on your pod before that have are heavy users of AI that have said the same thing. Is like these things will just tell you what you want to hear sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Here is like when I use it, sometimes it's like, "Oh, you had a great idea." Like
Yeah,
I did.
yeah. Thank you. I try.
Thanks. To dust the shoulder off, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know."
I know. I know. It's a really good. I mean, it makes you feel really great, but
Yeah,
it could be telling you the wrong thing. So
yeah. It tells you that it might be wrong. But just pay attention to that, right?
that's right. That's right. That's why, back to one of your original questions, that's why highly trained models are so important because the chance that model that's been so specifically trained on context for its objective, that the chance for that model to hallucinate and give kind of an incorrect answer is going to be much lower than that of a general foundational model that you would have on GPT or Gemini.
Mhm.
or Claude or anything like that. So that's why that's important. So when folks are out there looking at tools and different things, look for those organizations that are essentially using that human in the loop, using the understanding of a specific environment. Look that is influencing the responses of that model downstream.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, shifting towards DevOps methodologies. Oh my God, that's a mouthful. What is one security practice or control that is often overlooked or poorly implemented during rapid development and deployment cycles?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very simple answer. It's the supply chain, right? When folks listen to this, they hopefully they're in the technology realm, so they understand what I'm talking about when I say supply chain. But the dependencies on which software is built, right? If you're in tech, you've probably seen the little meme out there that has these stacked blocks, and then there's one tiny block, and unfortunately, a couple of big name providers of internet services over the last couple of weeks have been that little block that have tipped over and knocked the whole internet down. That understanding that there's a huge supply chain that makes these things happen, that makes software occur, and understanding where your dependencies are coming from is extremely important as not only a software engineer, but as someone who is tasked with ensuring that the deployment and monitoring of that software recognizes what systems and what dependencies are in use. Now, there's a lot of great tools out there that help you do that. You got Wiz, you got Orca, you got a ton of different tools out there that are helping developers understand what their software bill of materials looks like, so that they can prevent using dependencies that are just malicious in nature, or like NPM recently has just been hijacked to inject malicious code into its libraries, right? And a lot of things depend on NPM. So understanding your supply chain, what your system runs on, even if it's not necessarily a critical piece of the product that you're putting out to the world, understanding where those things stand with regards to their exploitability or their bugs or their security posture is extremely important. And then secondarily, if you can't get a clear SBOM, then to have robust monitoring and testing and SAST and DAST as a part of the deployment process, so that potentially, insecure software doesn't make it out the front door.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a hard problem, especially in the world we live in nowadays, because there are a lot of great engineers out there building a lot of great things that, developers stand on the shoulders of giants.
Mm-hmm.
And I would too, right? I'm not a classic developer, but if someone built a thing that I can reference that does the thing that would take me 30 days to write, I'm going to use that. And that's fine, but we need to make sure that when we use that, it's a secure piece of software,
Right.
that it's not introducing these vectors into, even your personal apps or an organization's application that can be exploited.
Yeah. I saw a meme earlier where it was saying the scariest person to ever know is a coder that can code from the
From scratch.
scratch on Notepad, right? No need of internet, no copy paste or anything like that. And then when they run it clean and there's no error. That's like the scariest person ever, right? I was
It
like,
is.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's and that almost goes back to foundational. Those people very rarely exist now, coming out of higher education, and the folks that it can just take and build their own libraries that will solve a specific function or problem that needs to be solved during the course of software development. Those folks are few and far between, but they still exist nowadays. If you don't know who they are, I would recommend you trying to find people. There's a gentleman I was listening to a podcast the other day. Forget his name, but a gentleman wrote his own development language because he didn't like the way in which the languages that he was writing in worked. These incredibly intelligent people still exist, and I recommend anybody listening to this that is a little bit intimidated by it, just to go listen to what they have to say, just to go understand exactly what makes those folks tick. Even if you're not like those folks, is just a wealth of knowledge for what you may be trying to accomplish in your own life. So
Yeah. So it's different perspective, right?
yeah,
So see, because somebody had to invent Java,
Yeah, absolutely. These
right?
things didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Someone
Yeah.
invented Go, someone invented React, someone invented Java, someone invented C++, someone invented COBOL. I mean, we got all the way back to punch cards. Having that foundational knowledge really, hopefully, opens up the aperture of what these systems are doing, because we've extrapolated quite a ways away from where we started.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, looking at the diverse security topics you've covered from the cloud to new technologies, what is the single most significant overarching security trend you're currently tracking as we head into the next year or into
Yeah.
2026?
Yeah. Once again, you're asking some good questions, some hard questions. I mean, because there's a lot of things to be concerned of on the cyber front,
Mhm.
right? We are seeing, I mentioned NPM takeover of different pieces of software. We're seeing vulnerabilities being introduced into very enterprise grade products, unintentionally by the vendors that are exploited by really smart people. Read an article yesterday on React to Shell and how that was exploited. So there's have always been and always will be a major concern. And I am a little bit biased, so I'm going to get around to my answer here, but I'm a little bit biased because I work for Sublime Security. And the reason why I work for Sublime Security is because they provide email security. And as a person who has worked in SOC operations, who has seen, some very talented and intelligent people, be capable of penetration testing, pivoting, on their own, and really doing some magical things to, test environments to see if they can exploit and gain entry. Email security still today poses one of the greatest threats to businesses and individuals,
Mhm.
because it is, I like to use the kind of euphemism of, it's the front door to an organization and to your house, because anyone can send you an email. Anyone can send you an email. And the only thing that you have to do as a user at an organization, or you as an individual, is to open that email, think it looks legitimate, click something, and then you're in a whole world of hurt. For an organization, it could mean ransomware or some sort of malware deployed within an environment trying to exfiltrate data. For an individual, it could be some sort of callback scam where your information is, shared with these adversaries who are just going to bug you to death, or could take advantage of, the older population who isn't necessarily as savvy when it comes to identifying these things. Email is that front door that every adversary has access to. Exploiting a vulnerability, like we saw with Anthropic's recent report, where that nation state was able to essentially build out autonomous activity, autonomous adversary attack activity with Anthropic's AI. It was looking for specific vulnerabilities to attack, which is scary, right? It's
Right.
super scary. Its success rate, I don't know it. The report didn't necessarily say how successful it was, but that's still very hard to do, even if you have AI, right? Because people can patch and vendors can put out, protections and stuff like that. But email is what is available for most folks, right? It's
Even
right
students,
there.
even the kiddos, like
Yeah.
a 5-year-old now has an email
Yep.
because they go to school, right? So they have a school email so that they can log in into their devices. So a kindergartner would have a like the kids at my son's school, the kindergartners has iPads
Yeah.
or tablets,
Absolutely.
right? So they have to have the email and a passcode or whatever, but still they're even more so vulnerable because they don't have that training. They don't know
Absolutely.
they're 5 years old.
They're 5 years old, and, that's incredibly frightening to see, but adversaries are amoral. They are not moral people, and especially in this day and age where, the best new game that comes out, and, our kids like playing games and stuff. There's even kind of like social engineering going on within games. So for
Mhm.
a business's perspective, I think the front door that you need to protect most is your email. And that comes through training. That comes through having the right kind of solutions in place to block the bad stuff and let the good stuff through. From a personal perspective, like just like you said, your kids now have this front door. They now have a front door that they can then be coerced into providing information via that front door through the carefully crafted message to a 5 or 6-year-old. And
Mhm.
that's extremely frightening. And it's not the sexiest cybersecurity thing to be scared of, right? There's going to be some very cool things that people come out and defend against over the course of the next year. artificial intelligence and hijacking is the wrong word, but the use of AI in mass attacks through autonomous attack activity is going to be something we'll likely see again in see more of in 26. But really, what it comes down to is email. In my opinion, it's got to be protect the front door, and that's what we can do.
Yeah, make sure that if we put the analogy of the house, is make sure you lock the door.
Make sure you lock the door. I was thinking of a good analogy to help explain it to my family and friends and folks that I'm talking to about email security. And I look at it as that little mail slot that folks have on their door sometimes.
Hmm.
Think of it as having a dog on the other end of that mail slot, and we've all seen the movies where that dog grabs that mail and just shakes it up and tears it up. Think of this as a well-trained dog on the other end that is able to see the mail that comes through that slot and tears up only the bad ones, right? So letting the bad ones, just ripping those up, shredding them to pieces, and the good ones, the dog just kind of bypasses and lets mom or dad go pick it up after that. But yeah, making sure that you have a good guard dog on that front door where that access vector exists.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, personal questions, and that's the last question that I have for you. So, outside of major security conferences, what is a non work related local activity or hidden gem in the city that you enjoy the most?
Non-work related local activity that
Yeah.
I enjoy the most. I am going to have to say it's going to be a combination of two things. So I live in West Virginia.
Okay.
In West Virginia, we don't have a lot of large cities, and I live in north central West Virginia. We don't have a lot of large cities. Pittsburgh's just north of us. Love that town. It's great. Stop in and see a Steelers game or a Pittsburgh Pirates game. It's awesome. PNC Park is awesome. But if I were to keep it right here at home, because I love this state, very proud to be a West Virginian, I would say you will not get a better time than going to a Mountaineer football game on a Saturday afternoon in late September, early October, sun shining, little bite in the air, hitting up the blue lot to see all your friends tailgating, tossing the football around in the blue lot there, and going in and seeing the Mountaineers get a win against an opponent, and then singing country roads at the end of it. So
Okay.
I would have to say, if you haven't done it before, if you're not a West Virginia native, we're pretty nice folks. We'll like to come in, we'll be your best friend, and we'll show you a really good time at a West Virginia Mountaineer football game.
Well, I'll take you up on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Kelvin and I will drive up.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. I'd love to host you guys.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much, Seth, for coming on the podcast and joining me on this conversation. It was very educational. I learned a lot. So thank you. And thank you to the Wise crew for joining us today. And see you next time.
Thank you, Tim.
Bye.
Bye.